Welcome back. I've been joined now by Dr. Lomefo. He's a social scientist and a policy analyst. He joins me now to do justice to the issue of education in Nigeria. Good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for hosting me.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
I know you are as much part of the academia as much as you are in other aspects, of the polity, so to speak. Let's talk about the recent developments in education. About a month ago or so, we saw the signing of the Student Loans Act, and a lot of people started to worry. Particularly, there was a word used in that act, tuition, and so far in the history of Nigeria, tuition is not something that has really been recognized. It is believed that education is free. You pay for other things such as levies and so on and so forth. But now we saw over just about last week, UNILAG, the University of Lagos, had over, I'd say, more than 400% increase in their fees. Still no tuition, but every other thing went up. We also saw for Unity schools, that the government runs, the prices have also gone up, over 100% increase also. What's your take on this? What do you think this means for the future?
First, I am not an apostle of full free education, especially the way it has been implemented in Nigeria. For me, I think education shouldn't be free beyond basic education, which for me is a primary and basic secondary, what they call junior secondary education. For me, that is the extent that education needed to be free in Nigeria, because at that level, you have gotten the individual citizen to be able to competently fix the issues that have to do with numeracy, literacy, and so on and so forth. Basic education. In other words, the person should be able to take on life from that point on. So if you want to proceed to senior secondary through tertiary, I believe that the parents and guardians will have to do something in collaboration with government. It should not be to the highest bidder anyway. By that I mean, there has to be right pricing. There has to be reasonableness in the kind of fees imposed. Yes, we know that education is poorly funded in Nigeria, but that is still not what you may call sufficient reason to throw the whole weight on the parents and guardians. Government will still have to come in to a reasonable extent, even if it is not by way of a subsidy, but by way of insisting that the various universities don't just go on their own, imposing charges like the UNILAG example. I believe that the reason you have a place like NUC and the Ministry of Education will be to tackle issues like this, issues related to policy, beyond quality control. The Federal Ministry of Education should be able to superintend the issue of charges that should apply to the various strata of education in Nigeria at tertiary level. Remember, I have said that I am for free education at basic level. Moving forward, you need to do what you may call multiple stakeholders engagement to get everybody to really look at the issues confronting the sector, and then all agree on the way moving forward. Yes, the fees will have to be imposed, but how much is the question here, as far as I am concerned. You will have to really get the stakeholders to come in and look at issues and come to a common ground, an understanding of what is reasonable within the economic context, and so on and so forth. I keep saying that the problem may have to do with what you may call, it goes beyond even pedagogy, curriculum. It goes beyond all that. The entire system needs to be overhauled, because if you have an educational system that does not directly service the industry, then it is useless as far as I am concerned. And if you look at the Nigerian university system, for example, do we say that the products of Nigerian universities as at today, service the industry directly? For example, employed as a graduate in the public service, are they able to really fit into the job they are expected to do at that level, as personnel officers, as admin officers, as this and that? Take, for instance, the banking sector. You go to the banking sector, you have graduates of banking and finance, but they don't fit into the Nigerian banking industry the way they are produced by the Nigerian university system. They have to be retrained for upward of 3 to 6 months before they can be fully deployed. That's the point I am making. So there is a disarticulation, between our citadel of learning and the industry itself. So, they shouldn't be looking at just imposition of fees to enable them have basic funds to run the educational system. They need to address the issue of functionality. And that's the point I have just made. That the university system as it is now can't service the industry. And they know it.
But do you think they are taking this into consideration? Because everybody keeps saying that if you want quality education, you must pay for it. But what you've described now is what is still happening. That's
what I'm saying. That you have to take the two together. Paying for it, but paying for what? Can we get value for our money even if we pay now? The way the system is, you can't. It doesn't matter how much you pay. And because I have been through it myself up to PhD level, so I know the system. As a matter of fact, I was privileged to attend a total of 4 Nigerian universities, state and federal. So I have a fair idea of what is going on in there. So I believe that we need to go back to the drawing board. There must be a clear connection between what you call the town and gown. What I mean by town and gown, town here represents the industry. Application of knowledge, and of course the gown here is the academia itself. When you have products that cannot service the industry, there is a fundamental problem. And I read somewhere somebody is saying that if you need to destroy a country, you don't even need an army. All you need is just to destroy the educational system. That way you have unqualified doctors, unqualified nurses, unqualified lawyers, unqualified engineers. That is how you get poor diagnosis. That is how you get poor treatment. That is how you get building collapse. That is how you get a system that is dysfunctional. That's the point here. We may say that it is no fault of the operators of the educational system, but again, it's partly theirs also. Because for me, sitting down there and receiving salary is not sufficient. If I am not getting if I don't have the tools with which to render the service for which I am paid, then I don't think morally and ethically it's right for me to continue to receive such salaries. So the operators of our educational system haven't done enough. They haven't done well, as far as I am concerned. If you go to Nigerian universities, federal universities at that, you will see congestion, you will see, enter the students' hostels. You will weep. And this is where you produce people that will become governors and ministers and citizens that will do this and that in the society tomorrow. The conditions under which learning takes place in the Nigerian tertiary institutions today is unbearable. Is sometimes unimaginable. When you see a classroom meant for 50 to 100, crammed by 200-300. More students are hanging by the windows beyond the earshot. They can't even hear the lecturer, let alone see. And they are expected to learn and be examined for such lectures that were received under such extraneous circumstances. So you need to really rejig the whole thing. I must also say that, look, you see, we are in the business of distributing certificates. In fact, in the Nigerian educational system, the way it is now, if you want to be educated, you have to really educate yourself. You need to go out of your way to really learn. Otherwise, the system is not ready to offer you much. These are facts. You can't see the lecturers until exams are, a few weeks close and all that. And when they are around, they hardly care. So that empathy that is required to have proper impartation of knowledge is clearly lacking in the system. So you will now see that what the students get at the end of the day is just the certificate, that you are a graduate. But the commensurate competence that ought to have been impacted in the process, clearly lacking. And that is why you can't get a graduate that can write a good letter today. So that's where the problem is. Compared to the Nigeria of two decades ago, Nigeria of 1950s, 60s, 70s, even up to 80s. Do you understand that? When some of us entered, went to university, up to 80s, the system was still good and functional. You will see that in the time past, Nigerian products at secondary level were fit only for Ivy League institutions in the US. When we say Ivy League, we mean the top-notch, top-class universities, in the US, Harvard and so on and so forth. Grade A institutions in the UK and so on and so forth. But today, they won't take you as a Nigerian product without subjecting you to some basic tests to be sure of your claim. If you want to do a master's in the UK now, there is a remedial master's you have to do first, for them to upgrade you, brush you to the level. Our educational system was not like that before. That's why I say that our products at secondary level were, directly fitted into Ivy League universities in the US and top-notch universities in the UK. But now it's no longer so. We struggle. Our medical doctors can't practice until they pass their remedial exams in those places, showing that our own system is no longer trusted. The integrity test has failed out there. So what has gone wrong? We lost our way somewhere. And that's why I said there's not just charging fees. We need to return to drawing board. We need to go back to, I talked about pedagogy, I talked about, curriculum and all that. Pedagogy goes beyond, it's all encompassing. It brings in holistically the issue of content and even how you teach it, how you deliver it, the condition.
But if this recommendation should be taken, don't you think the price would even be much higher than the increase we're already seeing?
See, let me tell you.
Because I don't think this has been factored in yet.
If they have to. Otherwise, they will not achieve any result. Let me tell you. You see, we mustn't be all graduates. Let us even face that. Do you understand what I'm saying? We mustn't be all graduates. Because that is the tendency. If you're not a graduate of university, particularly, you are not considered educated in Nigeria. But it's not supposed to be so. What happened to technical education? Do you understand that? Polytechnics. What happened to polytechnics? What happened to colleges of education? They are even worse off in the Nigerian situation. Check their minimum entry requirement. It's not at par with the entry requirements for universities. Theirs is inferior. In other words, even at the point of entering the polytechnic, entering the college of education, you are placed at disadvantage with somebody who has your colleague, your contemporary that has gone to the university in Nigeria. So that disarticulation in the system is what is accounting for all this. We are laying emphasis, too much on certificate. Certificate is not the issue. The issue is what you can do. Certificate is merely an evidence that you are trained to this level of competence. That is what it says. In learning and their character, I award you this degree. That is what it says. So it's awarded based on the fact that those two things exist. That you have been schooled to this extent, this degree, and then you are also brushed in terms of character. The two coming together, we want to see a competent gentleman, a lady. That's what is expected to be. But it's not what you get. Because you have certificates without content. That's my worry. We have certificates without content. And we now have products that can't really, defend the discipline that they represent, the discipline that they carry their certificates. That is the tragedy. So what do? You go back to drawing board, and rejig the content. Rejig the delivery system, how the content is delivered. Then you now discuss and agree on what we call appropriate charges that must go with tertiary education in Nigeria. Do you understand that? For me, if you can't score 50% in JAMB, you have no business entering university.
50 overall or in specific?
50% of the total score. You understand what I'm saying? And since the JAMB goes for 400%, right? In the four courses entered into, 50% here becomes 200. But you have people who want 120 in the university. In fact, there was even a time under the immediate past Minister of Education, Adamu, there was a policy proposal to reduce the entry requirement for Nigeria universities to 120 over 400. That is 30%. There is no place anywhere in the world that 30% is a pass. But the country is, tending towards that. So you can say, if you look at the official cutoff marks of universities in Nigeria, you see 180. You see 160. It shows that the system itself has accepted failure. Trying to redefine, pass, credit to be something else that is not at par with what you find in other climes. You can't take somebody who failed, without offering some remedial courses. Some universities try to do that. They take you and have you go through some remedial courses to brush you up and bring you up to par. But they don't even do that anymore. Since all you require is just about 160 over 400. You go to Nigerian Unity schools, it's the same. You will find students who scored 10, 20, over 200 in Nigerian Unity schools. Officially. And they tell you that they do this because of what they call a federal character quota system. Quota system, federal character, beautiful policies. They are containment policies, inclusivity. It tries to bring everybody to the table. But it does not sacrifice merit. There must be reduced, what we call irreducible minimum standard you must meet. So the only thing you now enjoy under federal character and quota system is the right of first refusal. It means you must meet the minimum requirement for you to access that slot, reserved for your area. But in Nigeria, it's not what we do. We take whoever qualified and unqualified and dump all of them on the system. So you go to universities where you can't understand what the students are there for, because the foundation is not there. You need to have proper primary education to process the pupils efficiently, effectively, to fit into secondary education. You also have to have proper secondary education, but will now process the students into tertiary education. That is the way it is done. So if you don't have a firm foundation at the primary level, there is nothing you can do in a secondary to salvage the situation much. And you see, everything is in learning psychology, we believe that learning is certain tasks are age specific. You need to do certain things at certain times. If you don't do it, then it becomes a problem for you when you grow up. For example, when you fail in the university, you fail a certain course, you are permitted to move to the next level, but you carry the course with you. It's the same thing. So when you don't discharge primary education properly and you find yourself in secondary, the baggage you are carrying from primary must be discharged in secondary, along with the responsibilities you have to discharge as well at secondary level. And that is it. So as you move on to the university, you discover that you have significant number of students who haven't quite processed their primary education.
Right.
Do you understand that?
Yes.
So you have people who are not qualified to be in the university, more than 50% of them, as a matter of fact, apart from the system not functioning properly to even process university education or tertiary education generally.
Right, it's kind of a sad situation, when you break it down that way.
Yeah.
But let's talk now about, the way things are. Someone made an argument recently when there was the counter argument that quality education costs money, and that it shouldn't just be free. And people say, is it really unreasonable to understand that people might not find it easy to pay for something suddenly when they've not been paying for it before? The other day, just to talk a little bit about social media, I saw a post by a young lady who's schooling in China. And she was basically blaming, she's a young lady, she's Gen Z as they call them. So she was blaming millennials and Gen X because the school fees she was paying, or the exchange rate, or so to speak, she was paying in her first year in China had, almost doubled now when she's in her third year or so.
Yeah.
And so she said, the millennials and the Gen X's have ruined my future for me. And
how did they do that?
No, she's talking about people who've been in power, that and all that, not just education. Yeah. So the question I want to put to you now is, these young ones today who have really not done anything on their own to warrant any sort of drawback or consequence, that's now suddenly have to deal with these consequences.
For me,
what's the way forward for them?
For me,
because they feel like they've been punished.
For me, those who are already in, do not have to go through this kind of sudden change, right?
You mean in the school system?
Yes, those who are already in the school system, right? Those who have already, started their education and all that. For example, those who are outside Nigeria and processing their fees from Nigeria at the old exchange rate. Government ought to have done something about that aspect. So when you say that they are floating the naira, those special cases you need to, especially once you are able to verify that indeed they have been accessing this fee. Do you understand what I'm saying? I believe that government should be able to remove such people from the equation that they are trying to bring about. That is my thinking. And then in bringing about new charges in the tertiary institutions, particularly the universities, that's why I say that you need multi-stakeholder engagement. I believe that fee will have to be charged, but it has to be fair. Do you understand what I'm saying? It has to be something that can be carried.
But has it not been fair all along?
It has not been fair all along, as far as I am concerned.
To the schools.
Yeah, I don't believe. For example, when I did my PhD in University of Nigeria, my fee was less than 100,000. For example, for me, I believe it was too little. Do you understand that? For me, I believe so. I believe it should be, some more. But it doesn't have to be priced out of this world to the point that nobody can be able to access it. Yeah. When you are bringing about certain things, you look at what we call the central tendency, the average person, what the average family should be able to deal with. Do you understand that? Yeah. That is what I call fair pricing, fair charges. If you do it that way, people should be able to. What that means is that government is saying, look, while I am doing this, you too, you need to take part of this burden off me, because the economy is no longer as buoyant as it used to be. But it would be wrong for government to dump the whole responsibility on parents and guardians. That's the point I'm making. In other words, I will never support that you will remove subsidy from education 100%. I will not. I don't think it's right. And I also don't think that tertiary education should be free. It shouldn't be free. But it has to be fairly priced, fairly charged. And the only way to arrive at what you may call fair charges at that level is to have multi-stakeholder engagement. If you do that, everybody will bring his strongest argument to the table. The parents and guardians will bring their argument to the table. Government will bring statistics to the table, and they will arrive at some kind of compromise. And once you achieve that, you will have a better tertiary educational system in Nigeria. What is happening now is a charade. It's not supposed to be. And let me repeat this point. We mustn't all be graduates. Nigerian government should be able to, for example, focus on technical education and even make it relatively free, make it cheaper for people to focus on. And when people discover that polytechnics offer cheaper and better deal to them, why wouldn't they encourage their wards to face that direction? But what has happened with polytechnic education, the one we call colleges of education, it begins from the point of entry. The entry requirements is made inferior to university system. It shouldn't be. They are all at the same level. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you want, because there is this argument, there is even a bill before the National Assembly. I don't know whether it has been signed into law. Seeking to place the university graduate and the product of polytechnics at par. How can you place them at par when their qualifications are not the same? Their entry requirements, do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Their entry requirements to obtain the training not the same. So if you have presented the products of polytechnics as inferior, ab initio, by making their entry requirements inferior to that of universities, that is where you have to really rejig. If you don't pass, you don't score 50%, you cannot access tertiary education. In fact, any level of education that requires that you move from one level to another, as far as I am concerned. But we don't do that. So I think it's a painful decision that must be taken. And you can see that there is even a kind of disparity in the charges. What UNILAG is announcing is not what SOCA is announcing. It is not what ABU is announcing. No, it shouldn't be. There must be some uniformity in this. Do you understand what I'm saying? At least at the federal university level. But since all the universities in Nigeria are under National University Commission for quality control, there must be a way of agreeing on what should obtain. Otherwise, the products will be so different. It will be so different to the point. It will be so different to the point that even the market, the industry will begin to reject certain graduates.
All right. I think one of the question that I'd really like to break down is, at what point did things go wrong? I mean this in terms of when you say that perhaps tertiary education shouldn't be completely free. And, we can even still go to the basic, which has also had some increase. The question now is, was this always part of the plan? When the government began this, did they believe or did they think that at some point we're going to take this away, or we're going to, kind of, losing our regulations that stops this increment. What went wrong that now necessitated?
Let me tell you what went wrong. What went wrong? The federal government has been in the business of amassing responsibilities and powers onto itself. By that I mean the federal government is over, asserting itself in the educational sector. Most of these universities you have seen were not built by the federal government. They were built by the states, but hijacked by the federal government. When they started that, rather than concentrate on a few federal universities that they built, you understand what I'm saying? They started taking over universities from the states, thereby increasing their responsibilities, funding in that sector. That is what happened. I wouldn't say that Nigeria has too many universities. I don't think so. But I also don't think we need to be in a hurry to establish more universities. What we need is to expand the capacities of the existing ones, and then establish what we may call specialized universities. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Technical universities, or universities that will emphasize certain technical areas.
Like the transport universities.
Yes, like transport university, maritime university, universities like that. They are specialized to focus on certain areas.
So can I just jump in here? Do you think the universities have any blame in this? We hear of universities, in other climes where they're almost sort of self-funded to an extent. We see them investing heavily in their science department, always wanting to get the next best thing, the next scientist who's going to get the Nobel Prize, who's going to bring funding into university. There's a lot of talk about universities being self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Is that, do you think the universities in Nigeria have any blame in that regard? Especially with the federal government having given them that.
I really don't think much of the blame goes to the runners, the operators of the university system. I don't think so. The Piper syndrome. Federal government is funding the system, and who pays the piper dictates the tune. The visitor of the university is the president. In the federal universities, the universities owned by the states is the governor that is the visitor. That underscores the fact that that university belongs to the president, belongs to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Do you understand that? In other words, it is government controlled. Government decides, appoints the vice chancellor, for example. Ordinarily, where you have university autonomy, the vice chancellor must be elected by the lecturers directly. In fact, the confirmation by the president or the governor is hardly necessary. But it's not like that. You may even have to, the government or the governor will have to appoint. And when you appoint the vice chancellor, his allegiance is not to the system, but to the appointer. These are the problems, besetting the system. And that is why I say that the federal government took over too much responsibilities. And that is why so many of us are talking about restoration of federalism. Federal government shouldn't take up too many responsibilities. What it's doing in education is overbearing. And it is returning very negative consequences in the quality of graduates we now produce. That is it. Because, what you may call internal regulatory mechanisms cannot apply. For example, in the federal universities, you can't do certain things without the approval of the Minister of Education, who is the direct appointee of the president, supervising the educational sector on his behalf in a presidential democracy. That's just the summary. If the president had the chance, he would be the Minister of Education directly. So because he cannot, he has to appoint some people to oversee certain areas, so that as human, so that himself can also have some sanity. So no matter how you look at it, the system is not self-regulatory. The vice chancellors have very limited powers. And because the allegiance is not to the system, not to the lecturers, not to the departments and faculties, but to the person that appointed him, there will always be that internal wrangling. And of course, they can choose to ignore them completely, because there is nothing they can do. They can't remove him. So that is the problem. You can't remove who you didn't put there. But if the lecturers in a proper autonomous university system have direct power to elect their vice chancellor, they can impeach him. But it can't happen. It cannot happen under the arrangement we have now. So the lecturers, to even progress in the system, will have to play the ball and be on the good books or the vice chancellor. Otherwise, you may have your progress in the system stalled, as long as that particular vice chancellor is there. And if it is a systemic problem, it does not matter the vice chancellor that is there. Another vice chancellor will still repeat the same process. Only a few of them manage to be democratic because of their personality, their own nature, not because the system does not allow them to be autocrats. The system does allow them to be autocratic, authoritarian. And it's partly why the system is not functioning. Because the lecturers trapped in this kind of quagmire, what they now do is, what you may call psychological absence from duty. They are there, but psychologically they are not there. They are busy running through other things. Many lecturers teach in 3-4 different universities. Do you understand that? To be able to beat up. If you have a single lecturer, teaching in 3 other universities, what time does he have to really pay attention to the university where he's considered a staff? He doesn't. He wouldn't. But that is the system you have. Why do they do that? You think they like, plying Nigerian roads, flying around if they can afford the flight? They don't like it, but because the system is not paying enough. How much is the salary of a professor? Less than 500,000. You can find that. Federal University. Less than 500,000 naira. Professor. So, you can see that even the remuneration is not there. The motivation is not there. And, but man must put their body and soul together. So, being there in the system, even though it is not paying, is still better than being totally unemployed. That is the foundation of what we call brain drain. People are just, it's not only lecturers that are leaving. Go to our tertiary health institutions. You will see that in the last 1 decade, they have lost to the diaspora over 50% of their manpower. Best brains left this country, and they are leaving every day. They are not the only ones. The youths that are unemployed, stranded, are leaving. You'll be surprised. You go to a place like Afghan embassy, Sudanese embassy, Ukraine embassy. You see Nigerians applying to go to those countries. War-torn countries. Our own citizens are fleeing home to those places where they are not sure they will not meet certain death. But they are going. What does that tell you? It means that the condition at home is as bad, perhaps worse than what they anticipate to get there. Even so, you discover that there is a systemic error. We need to reset the system. We need to rejig the country. Not just the educational sector alone. Every sector is comatose, as far as I am concerned. I can't look at any sector in Nigeria and say that, yes, there's a respite here. Which sector do you look at? Is it the roads that you have? Is it security? Is it so? The problem is symptomatic of a kind of what you may call the overall systemic problem of the Nigerian nation state. The polity is not right. It's not setting well.
I think you've hit the nail on the head now. But let's talk about on the scale of preference, or when we're talking about priorities. People have expectations from their government, and this particular period since President Tinubu's arrival, what we've been seeing is, removal of some of these things, systematically. It is said to be in the best interest of the people, and that overall is to help the government, right the ship, so to speak. But we know that a lot of these things are as a result of, mismanagement and so on and so forth. Now, speaking about the scale of priority, the examples you gave, interestingly, were still legal alternatives to the issues in the country. People going abroad, people going to other countries. But I think the elephant in the room here is that when someone can no longer afford education, it is more likely to be found somewhere that a lot of people do not want young people to be found. Because if education is expensive, like they say, I think they say, if education is cheap, ignorance is more expensive, so on and so forth. So we're saying that persons who are not educated are more prone to go into crimes, more prone to, not to know the ways things should go. So the question now is, on the scale of priority, even though things are not the way they should be due to years of mismanagement, don't you think the government should be able to say, when it comes to education, yes, we know that things are not well, but in this aspect, let us sacrifice. Let me just give some instance. Education, security, health. People expect that no matter what happens, even if the government is broke, even if the government is suffering, even if the government is impoverished, these things, they shouldn't touch it. Other things can begin to suffer. Perhaps people even say, the government themselves, the people in power, your allowances, your salaries, we saw the other day that about 40 billion is going to be expended on 2023 model of cars. There's no necessity for 2023 model of cars when fuel is 617 naira. So the question is, on the scale of preference, don't you think they should be able to say, we know things are not okay, but this education, we're going to leave it because the cost of doing the opposite might even hurt us in security and other places?
Yes, I understand the correlation you have built between a crime and crime and education. Yes, there is a correlation there. There's no doubt. And but again, I still believe that this functional educational system can produce only certificates, without commensurate content. In other words, you are producing, graduates that will be frustrated in the long run because they will not find themselves fit for purpose in the system that they are supposed to be servicing. That in itself will be as frustrating, if not more frustrating, than one who didn't go to school at all. For me, rather than continue with this kind of education, we better done that all. Do you understand that? For example, I said we don't even need to build more universities, even though I wouldn't say Nigeria has too many universities. No, we don't have too many universities. But we can emphasize for now, in the interim, can we do something about expanding the capacities of the ones we have? Do you understand that? Rather than set up new ones. And if you look at the number of people that write JAMB every year and the number that get absorbed in the system, yes, there is significant increase, right? Or what we may call balance of people that are not taking it. For example, if you have 1.2, 1.3 every year writing JAMB and only about 500,000 absorbed, by the tertiary institutions, it means that up to 700, 800,000 that would have been absorbed are actually left stranded for that particular academic session, and they will have to try again in subsequent years. These things all show that you really don't even have enough in the system yet in terms of the number of tertiary institutions that Nigeria should have. If you look at our population strength, it's up to 200 million, even though we are not quite sure of how many we are, because the last population census is seriously disputed, and there are reasons to believe that a lot of manipulations went through the process. So the number we are giving is mere estimate But by faith, we can work with that. You know, yes, government needs to do something, you know, in terms of, like I said, government cannot afford to dump the responsibility on the parents. Not the way things are, but the parents will have to take part of the responsibility, so that more money can be garnered in the system to be able to really power the tertiary educational system in Nigeria. But without rejigging the pedagogy, you know, content delivery and so on and so forth, if you don't rejig that before you introduce new fares, you are not going to get much result either, because it will tantamount to throwing money at a problem. The problem of the tertiary institutions in Nigeria is not only money. You have structural problems. You have structural defects. You have even structural inadequacy. For example, commensurate number of classrooms, commensurate number of hostels, and so on and so forth. A hostel that should officially house 4 students may by now taking up to 10. So you don't expect the students crammed in that kind of environment to be said to be enjoying the best of environment that will enable them pass through the university and the university passing through them. We can't say that. So it goes beyond money. And I said before, and I want to emphasize, I don't think it is right for individual universities to arbitrarily set up new charges for their students. It's very wrong. I think it is very wrong. I believe the Ministry of Education should do something. Moving now, hold multi-stakeholder, meetings. Let people come together and really agree. Let the Committee of Vice Chancellors meet and recommend something. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then the Minister of Education will take it at that level. We don't have a minister yet, but I believe that within the next couple of days, we will have a Minister of Education. Since constitutionally, President Tinubu does not have more than 3-4 days to comply, with the extant law that says that he must make available his ministerial list to the National Assembly within 60 days. That is 2 months. That said, the incoming Minister of Education, whoever he is, must see this as a priority. Otherwise, it will cause crisis in the system. And it is not something that will just go away overnight. There is need for declaration of state of emergency in the education sector.
Right, you understand that's fair enough. Because of time, I'd just like to get your comments now. You've spoken a lot about tertiary, but the increases or the few we saw in terms of unity schools, what do you make of that? Do you think that's something that they should completely reverse, or is something that also needs some level of...
Yes, the same solution is what I recommend for the unity schools. Okay. It shouldn't be free. I really believe this. It shouldn't be free because it's not...
That's at the secondary...
No, but it's senior secondary. Okay. I don't even believe that senior secondary should be free. I'm serious about this. Free education should terminate at junior secondary, because that is the level where an individual has been prepared sufficiently by the state, to be able to take on life. That is where I believe that if you consider education a fundamental human right, that I believe is where you should terminate. It's not everybody that must be a graduate. Let us do something about technical education, vocational education. Let our people learn, things that will put food on their table, even carpentry, mechanic, such stuff. Look for practical things that can put food on your table. University education is not an automatic employment. And again, my last line, the issue of, for example, those who are really brilliant but from indigent homes, yes, that is the reason you have the students' loan bill. That Student Loan Act is something that has to be reviewed, so that those who are really brilliant but have no person to take them to school, should be able to proceed to school. You understand what I'm saying? There are things I don't know how they are sitting in the education that bill. I don't know how that act, sorry, because it's been signed into law by President Tinubu. Yeah, we want to know, how do you start repaying? You understand what I'm saying? I believe that has to be addressed. What that means is that if there is no freedom, you know, for example, the law expressly stating that you have to be working, you know, before you start paying, and you don't really start paying immediately. If you start working, they need a kind of holiday of a 2 years before they now start paying. If these things are not, because I haven't quite read that you know, act. If these things are not contained in that act, it has to be repealed and amended, so as to reflect some of these things, so that we'll be able to, those who cannot afford education through their parents and guardians should be able to still go to school by accessing the education loans.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Law. You still have to stay with me just for a moment while we head into another conversation, but thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure is always mine.
All right, that's how we end it for today. Remember, the Polity reaches you live from Abuja every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Do join us tomorrow. Have a nice day. Bye for now.